You do not belong here. Leave the seat so the real VIP can sit where she deserves." The cutting words sliced through the first-class cabin of Orion Air Flight 2147. It was not a request, but a command. A public humiliation. Marcus Reed, 44, sat in seat 1A, the most prestigious spot. He lifted his head slowly, his face calm, though deep in his eyes burned a restrained fire. Around him, passengers stiffened. The soft clink of wine glasses stopped. The tapping of keyboards ceased. The luxury of first class had suddenly turned into an arena where stairs cut sharper than blades. Lauren Pike, the purser just past 30, forced a thin smile that could not hide her contempt. To her, seat 1A was reserved for Victoria Hale, 50-1, an investment fund director, a frequent flyer, generous with her tips. Victoria had just boarded, her designer bag gleaming under the cabin lights, her eyes narrowing when she saw Marcus occupying what she considered her usual place. She whispered to Lauren, but loud enough for the cabin to hear, "I always sit there. This is an insult." Marcus calmly presented his Diamond Elite card and boarding pass. His voice was deep, resolute. "Seat 1A is mine. I booked it months ago." In that moment, he was not only defending a seat, he was defending his dignity. But Lauren did not step back. Her voice sharpened. "I understand, sir. But this seat is normally reserved for our true VIPs. Mrs. Hale is one of our priority passengers." The hidden meaning was sharper than any blade. "You are not worthy of this place." Whispers rippled through the cabin. A businessman in 2B looked up from his laptop with a frown. A young woman in 3C, Nina Park, quietly raised her phone and began recording. Eyes darted toward Marcus, carrying annoyance, pity, and prejudice. Victoria seized the moment. She lifted her wrist with its gold watch, her voice firm. "I have an important meeting in Manhattan. I do not have time for delays." Everything was aligned to frame Marcus as the intruder, the out-of-place guest who needed to be removed so first, class order could be restored. Marcus drew a long breath, recalling the times he had been shadowed in grocery stores as a boy, the job applications dismissed for being not a cultural fit. Those memories converged into a voice calm yet unyielding. "Apologies, this is my seat. I paid for it, I need it to work, and I will not leave." The cabin froze. Lauren flushed, turned away in the hesitation, then quickly recovered, glancing at Victoria for direction. Victoria gave the slightest nod. A silent pact. Lauren hurried to the galley, where Todd Mercer, the 49-year-old cabin manager, stood. Moments later, Todd strode forward, his presence heavy with authority. His voice carried deliberately for all to hear. "Sir, we need your cooperation. This seat is for our VIP passenger. Please do not create difficulty for the entire flight." The word struck like a final blow, painting Marcus as the problem. He looked up. His voice was not loud, but each word struck like a nail into the silence. "I have shown my boarding pass. I have shown my membership card. There is no policy requiring me to surrender my seat to someone's preference." Todd faltered. Marcus's composure was a shield that unsettled him. Yet Victoria stepped forward, discreetly slipping a folded stack of bills into Lauren's hand. Her whisper caught on Nina's recording. was chilling. "Thank you for handling this. First class must have standards." Lauren's eyes gleamed. Todd gave a firm nod. The atmosphere thickened like a pressure cooker, every gaze slicing into Marcus's skin. An older man in 4A muttered, "He never belonged here anyway." The words landed like an invisible blow. Marcus did not react. He simply drew out his phone, switched on the camera, and said evenly, "I am recording the fact that I am being asked to leave my rightful seat without any legitimate reason." The cabin erupted in tension. Todd stepped closer, his face darkening. Then footsteps echoed from the cockpit. Captain Alan Briggs, 56, appeared, his eyes cold as steel. "If you do not vacate the seat, we will call security and have you removed from this flight." A sentence of judgment. Marcus met his gaze, heart pounding, but his expression steady. In that moment he heard his father's voice echo. "Never let anyone take your dignity, Marcus." He inhaled deeply and replied, tall and firm, "I am not leaving. This is my seat. If you force me off, you will have to explain why." The words struck like a spark on dry powder. No one in the cabin knew that the man being demeaned was not just a passenger. He was one of Orion Air's largest shareholders, holding power that could cripple the airline with a single decision. The cabin had never been so silent. A storm was about to erupt, yet Marcus sat tall, unbroken, his eyes blazing. He was not fighting only for himself, but for everyone who had ever been told, "You do not belong here." The first-class cabin of Orion Air felt like a pressure chamber. The murmur of passengers, the faint clink of glasses, the hum of the engines outside all became the background score to a tense performance. Every eye was fixed on Marcus Reed. The black man, dressed in a simple suit, sat upright in seat 1A, phone in hand, gaze steady and unyielding. Todd Mercer, the cabin manager, stood squarely in front of him. His voice was clipped, each word heavy. "Sir, this is your final chance. If you continue to refuse, we will be forced to remove you from the aircraft." Meanwhile, Lauren Pike, the purser, let her hand brush the pocket of her uniform. The bills from Victoria Hale were still there, still warm to the touch. Fear of losing that reliable source of income lit her eyes with calculation. She no longer thought of policy. She thought only of keeping the wealthy white woman in the aisle happy. Victoria tapped her manicured nails against the armrest. Each sharp click echoed like a gavel. She smirked, her voice cutting through the cabin. "We have wasted enough time. He is making this entire flight late. Get him out." A few passengers nodded. A middle-aged businessman in 2B muttered, "It's just a seat. Why make such a scene?" But Nina Park, the young woman in 3C, felt her heart race. Her phone trembled slightly in her hands, yet she kept it steady, recording every glance, every gesture. She knew she was witnessing something far greater than a dispute over a seat. This was a raw slice of injustice. Marcus looked directly at Todd, then shifted his gaze to Captain Alan Briggs. His voice was low but carried, each word striking like iron. "I am not causing a disturbance. I am sitting in the seat I purchased. This seat is mine, legally and rightfully. You are about to drag me out only because someone else wants it. Call it by its name. This is not policy. This is discrimination." A wave of silence rippled through the cabin. The words, "This is discrimination," exploded inside every listener's head. Some avoided his eyes, burying themselves in screens. Others whispered nervously. No one dared interrupt. Alan Briggs clenched his jaw. 30 years in the cockpit had shown him drunk passengers, unruly threats, even technical crises. But never had a man, sitting still and calm, made him feel unsettled. "You are obstructing flight operations," Alan said finally, as if delivering a charge. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping but firm as stone. "If you remove me from this aircraft, you will have to answer. Not only to the press, not only to the law, but to the board of directors of Orion Air itself." Todd frowned. Lauren shuddered. Victoria scoffed, convinced Marcus was bluffing to save face, but a few passengers exchanged startled looks. His words did not sound like the desperation of a man cornered. They rang like the declaration of someone with real authority. In her corner, Nina tightened her grip on her phone. "The board of directors?" Her heart skipped. She sensed she had just captured something critical. Todd lowered his voice, muttering only for Marcus. "Who do you think you are to talk like that here?" Marcus did not answer immediately. He inhaled deeply, steadying his breath. Inside, memories surged. Boyhood in Baltimore, shadowed in stores simply for existing. Job interviews rejected for being not a cultural fit. Long nights teaching himself to coo on an old library computer. Each step had carried him to this moment, a CEO, a founder, and a major shareholder in this very airline. He raised his head. His eyes shone, not with the look of a mere passenger, but of a man holding the scales of power. "You will soon find out who I am." The air froze. The words were few, but they cut through the staged charade like a blade. Lauren swallowed hard. For the first time in her career, she felt unsure. Victoria scowled, impatience flickering. Alan breathed heavier, realizing the situation was slipping beyond his control. Then came footsteps from the aisle. 2 security officers appeared, faces lit by the hallway lights, stern and unyielding. One spoke firmly. "Mr. Marcus Reed, please come with us." Marcus did not move. His phone kept recording, his eyes sweeping across the cabin. Some passengers looked away, but in Nina's eyes he saw silent outrage. He gave the slightest nod, as if making a promise to himself. "If they take me out, I will return stronger. And not just for me." In that moment, Marcus stood. But he did not bow his head. He rose tall, every step deliberate, steady, and unbroken as he walked down the aisle. Each footfall struck like a drumbeat. They were not the steps of a defeated man, but of one preparing for open war. No one in the cabin knew, aside from a handful of insiders, that Marcus held 20% of Orion Air's stock and was leading a $60 million partnership deal with the corporation. A deal that could determine the airline's very survival. They thought they had forced a passenger out of his seat. But in truth, they had ignited a storm that could sweep away their entire careers. Marcus Reed walked slowly down the aisle, 2 security officers flanking him on either side. In the first-class cabin, eyes followed him with mixed emotions, some gloating, some pitying, others silent out of fear. Victoria Hale dropped into seat 1A, placing her designer bag beside her, as if reclaiming a trophy. Lauren Pike's hands trembled as she poured a glass of champagne for her, the crystal clinking against her fingers. Todd Mercer's gaze darted to the wad of bills hidden in his jacket pocket, his face flushed crimson. And Captain Alan Briggs stood frozen at the cabin door, his heart pounding as though he knew a monumental mistake had just been made. Whispers spread through the cabin. Passengers pulled out their phones, sending texts, tweeting, sharing clips. In Nina Park's hands, a 60-minute recording captured everything. Lauren's scornful words, Victoria's urging, and the moment Marcus declared, "This is not policy. This is discrimination." Nina's hands shook with adrenaline. So she knew this video would ignite a firestorm. And within minutes, as Marcus was being escorted down the jet bridge into the terminal, the hashtag #Orion Injustice began to trend on Twitter. In the airport's VIP lounge, Marcus sat quietly, his suitcase at his side, phone in hand. He showed no outward anger. Instead, there was a chilling calm, like a wolf waiting for the moment to strike. On his screen, views skyrocketed from hundreds of thousands to millions in real time. One comment stood out. The CEO of Innovate Systems, a $3.5 billion AI company, was thrown out of the seat he paid for simply because he didn't look like a VIP. This is the reality of air travel today. Marcus read the words, the corner of his mouth curving into the faintest smile. He had kept his identity hidden while sitting in seat 1A, but now the secret was out. He opened a message and typed a few lines to Elizabeth Grant, COO, and his most trusted partner. They picked the wrong man. Get legal and PR ready. Call an emergency shareholder meeting. This isn't just personal. This is a test of the entire system. Elizabeth replied instantly. Understood. Legal is already on it. PR is monitoring the hashtag. We're turning this storm in our favor. Back on the plane, as the doors closed and passengers prepared for takeoff, Nina Park couldn't stay silent. She posted the entire video to TikTok with the caption, "This man was forced out of his rightful seat just because someone else wanted it. Watch how he held his dignity." The video spread like wildfire. Within an hour, it had 5 million views. Outrage filled the comments. This is blatant discrimination. Throwing out a major shareholder of your own airline is suicide. Marcus Reed isn't just a passenger. He's the man who could bring Orion to its knees. At Orion Air's Dallas headquarters, CEO Robert Mitchell was in a meeting when the PR director burst in, pale as chalk. "Sir, we have a serious problem." A video of a first-class passenger being removed is going viral, and that passenger is Marcus Reed. Robert's eyes widened. Marcus Reed? He's one of our largest shareholders. The PR director nodded, hands trembling as he held out an iPad. On screen, Marcus was shown being forced out of his seat, while Victoria Hale quietly slipped money to Lauren. The bribe, the discrimination, the humiliation, every detail laid bare. The boardroom fell silent. The CFO whispered, "He holds 20% of our stock. If he dumps it, billions in market value evaporate." Robert's breath quickened, sweat forming on his brow. He knew that Innovate Systems, Marcus's company, was also Orion's partner in a $60 million technology deal set to close. If Marcus walked away, it wouldn't just sink their stock, It would kill Orion's digital future. Back at the airport, Marcus left the lounge. He didn't call a press conference, didn't shout into cameras. Instead, he slipped into a waiting limousine where Elizabeth was already seated. "The video is exploding," Elizabeth reported, her laptop glowing with surging analytics. "We have absolute momentum. The whole world is on your side." Marcus was silent for a long moment before speaking, his voice low and resonant like a vow. "This isn't just momentum. This is an opportunity." They thought dignity could be bought with a stack of bills. "I will show them. Dignity is the one thing no money can buy." Elizabeth looked up. In Marcus's eyes, she saw not only fury, but conviction, the determination to turn personal humiliation into the lever that could change an entire system. That night, as the limousine pulled away from the airport and city lights flickered across the windows, Marcus replayed the video again. Lauren's voice, Victoria's commands, Todd's complicity. Every word was evidence that could not be denied. He remembered his father's voice from childhood. "You may lose a job, you may lose possessions, but never let them take your dignity." Marcus smiled faintly and whispered, "They've just given me the chance to prove it." He leaned back into his seat. Outside, the hashtag #OrionInjustice was climbing straight to #1 worldwide. The storm had begun. And this time, Marcus was the one steering it. At Orion Air's glass and steel headquarters in Dallas, the lights never went out that night. On the 32nd floor, the strategy boardroom glowed unnaturally bright. Senior executives had been summoned in haste, each one filing in with a heavy expression. Robert Mitchell, the 58-year-old CEO, sat at the head of the table. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his palm slamming against the polished wood. On the giant screen behind him, the video of Marcus Reed being forced from his seat played again. Lauren's voice, Victoria's demands, the bribe handed off in cash, all of it echoed in the room. No one dared breathe too loudly. "Do you see this?" Robert roared, his voice slicing the air like a blade. "We just threw off one of our largest shareholders, and at the same time, a technology partner critical to the survival of this company." A wave of silence followed. CFO Linda Torres whispered, "The stock is already down 14% in just a few hours. If Marcus dumps his 20% stake, Orion will lose billions in market value." PR director Laura Bennett chimed in, hands shaking as she held a report. The hashtag #Orion. Injustice is #1 worldwide. 12 million views in 6 hours. Every major outlet is covering it. They are calling this the worst discrimination scandal in U.S. aviation history. Robert clenched his fists, his face taut. What rose inside him was not just fear of financial damage, but the looming collapse of Orion's reputation, a reputation built over 40 years. Meanwhile, in a quiet Manhattan hotel suite, Marcus Reed sat with his team, Elizabeth Grant, COO, attorney Maria Chen, and PR chief Jamal Wright. The atmosphere was the opposite of Dallas, focused, cold, deliberate. Elizabeth spoke crisply. "We have all the evidence we need. Nina Park's original video, Marcus's own recordings, witness testimony from several passengers. The media is on our side. The question is, what's next?" Marcus sat upright, eyes burning with resolve. He was no longer the humiliated passenger in seat 1A. He was a strategist, a shareholder with the power to determine the company's fate. Tomorrow, I will call an emergency shareholders meeting. They need to understand this isn't a simple incident. This is a culture rotten to its core. Maria Chen nodded firmly. The law is on your side. There is clear evidence of bribery, discrimination, and violation of customer rights. If you want, we can take this straight to federal court. Marcus shook his head, his voice low but steely. No. I don't want to sue for money. I want to change the system itself. Orion will face the truth, or destroy itself. Back in Dallas, the boardroom erupted in argument. CFO Linda Torres spoke urgently. We need to negotiate with Marcus privately. Public apology, compensation, promises of reform. Whatever it takes to keep him from leaving. The HR director snapped back. If we fire that crew immediately, the union will revolt. They'll sue us in return. Robert slammed the table. We have no choice. Marcus is not an ordinary passenger. He can bury this company alive. Laura Bennett added gravely. He is not just the CEO of Innovate Systems. He is a symbol of fairness in the AI world, with a philosophy of no one left behind. The public sees him as a hero. We are standing against a social movement. The room grew dense with fear. Nervous glances, fingers tapping restlessly against the table. Heavy breaths filled the silence. Everyone knew Orion's future was no longer in their hands. It was in the hands of the man they humiliated that very morning. In the hotel suite, Jamal Wright spoke with measured force. Our communication strategy is clear. You are not a victim, Marcus. You are the one driving change. The message must be this. This was never about seat 1A. This is about the dignity of every passenger who has ever been told they don't belong. Marcus nodded. He looked out the window at New York's glowing skyline, his heart beat steadying. In his mind rose the image of his father, a mechanic who once told him, "Turn your pain into power." He whispered, "Yes. This is no longer just my story. This is everyone's story." Elizabeth placed her hand firmly on the table. Then tomorrow, we don't just walk into a shareholders' meeting. We walk into a revolution. In Dallas, the clock struck 1 a.m. Robert Mitchell sat alone after the others had left. He glanced at his phone, where a notification glared. Marcus Reed had called for an emergency shareholders meeting at 9 o'clock the next morning. Robert closed his eyes, his shoulders trembling. He knew that when the boardroom doors opened tomorrow, the balance of power would tip, and Orion Air's history might veer onto a path no one had foreseen. 9 a.m. The glass tower of Orion Air in Dallas gleamed under the morning sun. But inside, the atmosphere was colder and more suffocating than ever. The carpeted hallway leading into the main boardroom stretched like a tunnel toward judgment. Marcus Reed walked in, his stride straight and deliberate, dressed in a charcoal grey suit without a tie. The simplicity of his appearance stood in stark contrast to the polished, overdressed executives lining the long table. Yet it was the calm authority in his every step that froze the room in place. Elizabeth Grant, his COO, followed closely behind, laptop open with documents ready. Attorney Maria Chen and PR Director Jamal Wright sat nearby, faces set in stone. No one spoke, but their mere presence radiated the weight of a unit meticulously prepared for battle. On the giant screen, the infamous video played once more. Lauren Pike sneering, "This seat is for a real VIP." Victoria Hale tossing money as if feeding scraps to a dog. Todd Mercer's cold face as he forced Marcus to stand. And finally, Marcus walking slowly between two security officers, his back unbent, his eyes unwavering. Every second of the footage cut into Orion's credibility like a blade. Some shareholders buried their faces in their hands. A few directors tried to maintain composure, but their trembling fingers betrayed them. Robert Mitchell, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, his complexion ashen. His fingers tapped lightly on the polished surface, his voice hoarse. "Let's begin." Marcus did not sit. He remained at the opposite end of the table, leaning forward with both hands pressed against the wood, his gaze sweeping across the board. "You have seen enough. I will not repeat what the video has already spoken for me. But I am not here today to demand an apology. I am here to demand justice for every passenger who has ever been demeaned, and to save Orion from its own rot." His words landed like thunder. CFO Linda Torres hesitated. "Mr. Reed, we acknowledge this was a serious mistake, but firing employees immediately could cause major conflict with the union." Marcus cut her off, his voice sharp and commanding. "This was not a mistake. This was culture. A culture that encourages bribery, tolerates discrimination, and treats customers as disposable. Do you want to face the union, or do you want the entire airline to collapse?" The room erupted in noise. Some shareholders nodded in support of Marcus, while others exchanged anxious looks. Robert Mitchell drew a deep breath, struggling to steady his tone. "What do you want, Marcus?" Marcus straightened, his voice ringing clear, each word carved into the walls. "I have two demands. First, the immediate dismissal of Lauren Pike, Todd Mercer, and Captain Alan Briggs. Second, a complete overhaul of Orion's service culture, with mandatory anti-bias training for every employee. If not, I will liquidate my entire 20% stake and withdraw the $60 million technology deal with Innovate Systems. When that happens, Orion's stock will plummet into free fall." The boardroom exploded. An HR director shouted, "This is impossible! The union will—" Another shareholder cut in, his voice trembling with fear. "If he dumps his shares, we lose everything." Robert slammed his fist on the table, the crack silencing the room. His eyes, bloodshot with strain, locked on Marcus. "You are cornering us." Marcus met his stare, his voice low but unyielding. "No. You cornered yourselves the moment your crew took money to humiliate a paying passenger. I am only dragging the truth into the light." The silence that followed was suffocating, the tension strung tight as wire. At last, Linda Torres spoke, her voice shaky but resolute. "If I have to choose between the union and Marcus Reed, I choose Marcus. He holds the shares, the technology partnership, and most of all, he holds public opinion." Several shareholders nodded in quick agreement. Murmurs spread around the table. Robert Mitchell knew he had lost. He sank back into his chair, eyes closed for a moment, then opened them, his voice breaking. "Fine. The crew will be dismissed. We will sign the commitment to reform." Marcus gave a small nod. There was no smile, No triumph in his face, only a voice, deep and solemn, like a final warning. This is only the first step. If Orion wants to survive, it must prove it can change at its core. If not, I will not hesitate to press the button that brings this entire company down. In that room, everyone understood. Power had shifted hands. Orion Air no longer belonged solely to its board. Its fate now rested with the man who had once been dragged from seat 1A, now the man who held their future in his grasp. That afternoon, the 14th floor of Orion Air headquarters, home to the Human Resources Disciplinary Chamber, became the stage for a trial without a jury. The hallway was silent except for the sharp echo of high heels. Karen Patel, head of HR, walked steadily, 3 crimson files tucked under her arm. Each bore a name: Lauren Pike, Chief Flight Attendant; Todd Mercer, Cabin Manager; Alan Briggs, Captain. Inside the room, the 3 sat side by side, but refused to look at one another. Lauren clenched her hands tightly, her eyes dark from sleepless nights, her makeup faint and fading, as if clinging to the last traces of professionalism. Todd leaned back, his face flushed, his eyes burning with defiance. Alan Briggs, with over 30 years in the skies, sat rigid, the deep lines on his face carved by fatigue and resignation. Karen placed the 3 files on the table. Flanking her were 2 legal officers and a pair of guards in black suits. Her voice was not loud, but every word was sharp, cutting through the air like shears through fabric. The board has made its decision. You are here today to hear the final verdict. Lauren spoke first, her voice trembling. I was only following routine. Mrs. Hale always sits in seat 1A, I thought. Karen cut her off, tossing the file toward her. Routine must never rise above principle, especially when that routine is fueled by money and favoritism. Lauren bowed her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. Todd slammed his hand on the table, the chair shaking violently. That man was disruptive. I was only doing my job to keep the flight safe. Without me, the cabin would have descended into chaos. From the corner, Maria Chen, Marcus's attorney, let out a cold laugh. Karen opened the second file, pointing directly at the printed photo. Todd caught mid-action, tucking money into his pocket. This is the truth, Mr. Mercer. You were not safeguarding the flight. You were safeguarding your own pocket. The room fell into heavy silence. Todd opened his mouth to argue, then snapped it shut, his eyes darting wildly as though searching for an escape route. Alan cleared his throat, his aging hands trembling. I only trusted the report of my crew. I thought it was the decision to keep order in the cabin. I did not see the full picture. Marcus was not physically present, yet his voice seemed to echo in the room. Karen closed the final file, her gaze locked on Alan, her tone softer, but no less stern. You had 30 years of experience, captain of thousands of flights, but in the moment of truth, you chose prejudice over justice. You did not just fail, Marcus Reed. You failed your oath as a pilot. Alan lowered his head. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, dropping onto his faded blue shirt. Karen reopened the files, her voice clear and resolute. The decision of the Orion Air Board of Shareholders, effective immediately. Termination of Lauren Pike, Todd Mercer, and Alan Briggs for violations of professional ethics, acceptance of bribes, and discriminatory conduct toward a passenger. Lauren broke down into sobs. Todd's face reddened with rage. His teeth clenched as he shouted, "You are destroying my career over one stubborn man." Karen replied coldly, "You destroyed your own career. We are only reading the sentence." The two guards stepped forward. Lauren buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking as she was escorted out. Todd struggled and resisted, but was restrained and forced to leave. Alan rose slowly, each step heavy, saying nothing, head bowed as though carrying 3 decades of his career on his back. When the door slammed shut, Karen exhaled deeply. In that moment, she understood. This was not just the end of 3 careers. It was a warning to the entire system. In another room of the same building, Marcus watched through a live feed. Elizabeth sat beside him, Jamal typing furiously as he drafted the first lines of the press release. Maria stepped out, nodding firmly to Marcus. "It's done. They've been dismissed." Marcus did not smile. He stared at the blank screen that had just gone dark, his eyes heavy. "This is not victory. This is only the beginning." Elizabeth turned to him, asking softly, "How do you think the public will react?" Marcus answered slowly, each word deliberate. "They will see that justice has begun to speak. But if we stop here, it is nothing more than a staged dismissal. I want more. I want root and branch reform. And I will make Orion the symbol of that change." Jamal looked up, a thin smile curling at his lips. "This story is no longer in their hands, Marcus. It's in yours." Marcus nodded lightly. Beyond the glass, the Dallas sky glowed with the colors of sunset. A chapter had closed, but the storm of reform had only just begun. The next morning, the press hall of the Grand Dallas Hotel was packed with reporters. Every camera pointed at a small podium where Marcus Reed was about to appear. The atmosphere was tight as a drawn bow. On the large screen behind the stage, the words were clear. "Orion Air, a new beginning." Marcus appeared. No armor, no bodyguards, only a simple suit. Yet the calm in his stride silenced the entire room. He stopped before the microphone, sweeping his gaze across the hall, an expression that was both firm and warm, like a man who had endured battle, but still believed in the dawn. "Yesterday," Marcus began, his voice steady, "I was forced out of my rightful seat on a flight operated by the very airline I invest in, not because of any mistake, only because someone thought I did not look like a VIP." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Keys clattered as reporters rushed to capture every word. Marcus paused for a beat, then continued, his voice sharpening with each syllable. "But this is not just my story. This is about every passenger who has ever been watched, belittled, or judged unworthy because of skin color, attire, or background. Seat 1A is not just a seat. It is a test of dignity." The room erupted in applause. Some reporters who had prepared pointed questions fell silent. They realized they were not facing only a CEO, but a symbol. Marcus lifted his head, his voice dropping lower, resonant with authority. "Today, As a major shareholder and strategic partner, I declare that Orion Air will undergo a complete reform. First, all employees will complete an anti-bias training program designed by Innovate Systems. Second, accepting money or granting personal favoritism to passengers will be strictly forbidden. Third, every passenger, from economy to first class, deserves to be treated with equal respect. Cameras panned quickly. The furious tapping of keys filled the hall. On reporters' phones, the hashtag #OrionReform began to spread in real time. In the front row, Jamal Wright smiled faintly. He knew every line Marcus delivered had been carefully prepared, yet once spoken, they carried the breath of truth, turning a dry announcement into a flame. Marcus lowered his tone, but each word landed like a hammer. And finally, anyone who repeats discriminatory behavior, whether a flight attendant, a manager, or a captain, will be terminated immediately. No exceptions. The hall exploded with reaction. A CNN reporter leapt to his feet. "Mr. Reed, are you not afraid that such harsh measures will spark backlash from unions, possibly paralyzing Orion's operations?" Marcus smiled lightly, his gaze flashing like steel. "What I fear more is Orion continuing to exist in the shadows of prejudice. I would rather face short-term pain than die slowly from the loss of trust." Meanwhile, at Orion headquarters, Robert Mitchell and the executive board watched the live stream. A human resources director paled, whispering, "He is turning the entire company into his own." Linda Torres, CFO, shook her head and sighed. "No, he is saving us, and we have no other choice." Robert clenched his fist, his eyes locked on the screen. He knew that from the moment Marcus stepped onto that podium, the balance of power within Orion had shifted. On social media, #Orion Reform and Justice for 1A shot to the top worldwide. Thousands of people shared their own stories of mistreatment while flying, tagging Orion as a symbol of change. One woman posted, "I was once asked to change seats because I didn't look like first class. Today, I see someone stand up for all of us." Another passenger wrote, "Marcus Reed didn't just claim his seat, he claimed a seat for all of us." The world was watching, and the fire had spread. That evening, in the private suite of the hotel, Elizabeth Grant set her laptop down and turned to Marcus. "You just turned a personal humiliation into a global movement. But are you certain Orion will go all the way?" Marcus sat in silence for a few moments. The golden light of the lamp cut across his face, half in shadow, half in glow. His mind replayed the moment he was forced to rise from his seat, the cold stare of the captain, the mocking laugh of Victoria. "Elizabeth," he whispered, slow but strong, "if they do not go all the way, I will make them." In his eyes there was no longer anger, but resolve. The resolve to turn personal disgrace into a historic turning point for the entire airline industry. News of Marcus Reed's speech spread like thunder. In less than 24 hours, every media outlet replayed the moment he declared, "Seat 1A is not just a seat, it is a test of dignity." That line became a slogan, printed on shirts, plastered on banners, and quoted in countless commentaries. But while the public cheered, inside Orion Air, the undercurrents churned. At the crew training center in Houston, Dozens of employees gathered in hushed circles. A young male flight attendant, face tight with anger, muttered, "They just fired Lauren, Todd, and even Captain Briggs, all because a major shareholder wanted to prove his power. Today it's them. Tomorrow it could be any of us." A female attendant bit her lip, her voice trembling. "But did you see the video? It was clear they took money, clear there was discrimination." The young man shook his head, cutting her off. "We work under customer pressure every single day. Who hasn't had to be flexible to keep VIPs happy? And now what? One slip and your career is gone." His words ignited the room. Many nodded, the air thick with discontent. The union seized the moment. An internal statement was released. "We oppose these groundless dismissals and will defend the rights of labor." Meanwhile, in a luxury Manhattan apartment, Victoria Hale, the woman who had claimed seat 1A with a wad of bills, was living her private hell. Social media overflowed with the video of her slipping cash into Lauren's hand, alongside the words, "First class must have standards." Newspapers branded her the airline Karen. Memes spread everywhere. Investors pulled funds from her firm, and her company's stock plunged. Victoria hurled her phone onto the sofa, her eyes bloodshot. "Because of one stubborn black man, my entire career collapses." Her young assistant, standing off to the side, whispered nervously, "Ma'am, public opinion is overwhelming. Perhaps the best thing would be to issue a public apology." Victoria spun around, her voice a hiss through clenched teeth. "Apologize? Never. I'll show him that not every battle is won by public opinion." Back in Dallas, Marcus and his team held a closed-door meeting. Jamal Wright laid a media report on the table, his voice urgent. "The public is firmly on our side. But the union just released a statement of protest. If they organize a strike, Orion could be paralyzed for days." Elizabeth frowned, worry etched in her eyes. "Marcus, you're walking a tightrope. On one side, public support. On the other, thousands of employees who feel threatened. If they turn against you, the entire reform collapses." Marcus was silent. He knew that to change a system, anger alone was not enough. He had to reach the hearts of those inside it. "We need dialogue," Marcus said, his voice low but steady. "I will meet the union directly. If they believe I came to destroy their careers, I will show them I came to save them." Maria Chen nodded. "But be ready. They will not listen easily. To them, you are an outsider imposing change." Marcus gazed out the window. Dallas was sinking into sunset, the skyline bathed in gold. He whispered, "No one hears the truth the first time. But if we are steadfast, they will have to listen." In the hallway of Orion headquarters, Robert Mitchell spoke quietly with Linda Torres. His voice was hoarse from sleepless nights. "If Marcus succeeds, we escape the abyss. But if the union resists, we're finished." Linda replied, her tone weary. "How ironic, Robert. We once thought he was just a troublesome passenger. Now the fate of Orion rests in the hands of the man we dragged out of seat 1A." Robert clenched his fist. In his eyes, for the first time, flickered something unfamiliar. Not just fear, but respect. That night, Marcus received an anonymous email from an unknown address. The message was short, only 4 words, Be careful, Reed. He stared at the screen. No one but him and a handful of close shareholders knew the details of the $60 million deal. Someone in the shadows was preparing to strike back. Marcus inhaled deeply. In that moment, he understood. This battle was no longer against a few corrupt crew members. It had become a confrontation with entrenched forces guarding their long-standing interests in aviation. He murmured, almost to himself, "Then let's see who really doesn't belong here." The Houston Convention Center that morning was packed. More than 200 Orion Air Union delegates sat in long rows, their eyes tense and fixed on the podium. A red banner hung behind the stage, emblazoned with the words, "Protect workers' rights. Resist unilateral decisions." Marcus Reed walked in. The room instantly filled with whispers. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with open anger. To them, he was not the symbol of justice seen on social media, but the man who had cost 3 colleagues their jobs overnight. Union President Harold Jenkins, a burly man with a voice like a hammer on steel, stepped up to the microphone. "Mr. Reed, we are not here to listen to polished speeches. We are here to ask you, what gives you the right to demand the dismissal of our crew?" Applause and whistles erupted around the room. The air was boiling. Marcus stood silent, his eyes sweeping over every face. He did not answer immediately, only took a slow breath. His voice rang out, not loud, but solid as steel. "I am not here to fire anyone. I am here to save the future of everyone." The noise dipped slightly, but suspicion lingered. A young female flight attendant shot to her feet. "Save the future? What about Lauren, Todd, and Captain Briggs? They lost their jobs, and you became a hero on the news. Is that your idea of justice?" Marcus looked directly at her, his gaze steady. "I take no joy in their dismissal. But when someone takes money in exchange for a passenger's dignity, that is not a small mistake. It is a fracture that shatters trust. If left unchecked, Orion would lose the very customers we fly for." Harold slammed his hand on the table, his voice hard. "We do not need a lecture about trust. We need jobs. You want reform? Fine. But do not sacrifice our livelihoods." Marcus stepped forward, his words slow but unyielding. "I understand your fear. I was born into poverty. I was turned away from jobs because of my skin color. I know what it feels like to lose a chance to survive. But I also learned this. If we do not clean ourselves from within, the world will do it for us, and the cost will be 10 times higher." The room grew quiet again. Some exchanged glances, doubt flickering in their eyes. Marcus continued, his voice lowered, sharp as a blade. "I am not here to steal your jobs. I am here to ensure that your children and grandchildren never hear the words, 'You don't belong here,' when they step onto a plane." Those words pierced through suspicion like an arrow. Faces softened, expressions wavered. But before Marcus could finish, the doors to the conference hall burst open. Victoria Hale walked in. She wore an elegant black dress, her platinum hair pinned high, her fury hidden behind a cold smile. The room erupted in murmurs. "That's the VIP passenger, the one who started all of this." Victoria strode to the front, her voice sharp and commanding. "Dear union members, do not be fooled. Miss Reed is not here for you. He is here for power. Yesterday, he made 3 of your colleagues sacrificial offerings. Tomorrow, he could make any one of you his next victim." Applause rang out from one corner of the room. Clearly, Victoria had come with allies. Marcus fixed his gaze on her, his eyes hardening. "Mrs. Hale, you should not even be here. It was you who slipped money into the attendant's hand. You lit the match that set this collapse ablaze." Victoria let out a sharp laugh. "Yes, I gave money, but do not pretend this industry hasn't run that way for decades. Everyone knows the true VIPs are the ones who keep airlines alive. You cannot change that." Marcus leaned into the microphone, his voice short, forceful, each word striking like a hammer. "No. I will change it. And this time, you cannot buy back the truth with any check." The conference hall erupted. Half the union applauded, the other half wavered in uncertainty. Harold Jenkins clenched his fists, his eyes darting between Marcus and Victoria. In that moment, Marcus understood. This battle was not about a video or his shares. It was about the hearts of the workers, torn between fear and belief. And he knew if he failed here, all reform would vanish like sand washed away by the tide. The Houston Conference Hall had become a battlefield. On one side stood Marcus Reed, eyes blazing, every word striking straight into people's hearts. On the other was Victoria Hale, her cold smile dripping with suspicion, each sentence sowing doubt. Between them, the union murmured like crashing waves, swaying between support and opposition. Union President Harold Jenkins wiped sweat from his brow. He raised his hand for silence, his voice cutting through the room. "Enough. We are not here to listen to 2 people argue. We are here for the truth. Who among you is truly here for us, the workers, and not for their own gain?" Victoria smirked and pulled a thick folder from her bag, tossing it onto the table. Papers scattered across the surface like falling snow. "Here is the proof," she declared. "Marcus Reed used his shares to coerce Orion Air into firing your colleagues, bypassing union procedure. He is nothing more than a dictator in a fine suit." Murmurs filled the room again. Some nodded, doubt creeping back into their faces. Marcus stared at the folder, but did not move. Slowly, he reached into his leather case and placed a USB drive on the table. His voice dropped, steady and sharp. "If we are speaking of proof, then this is the real proof." He signaled to Elizabeth Grant, who immediately plugged the USB into the projector. The large screen flickered to life. Audio files and emails appeared, every line a blade. Regular payments from Victoria Hale to Lauren Pike and Todd Mercer. Instructions to reserve seat 1A for her, regardless of who had booked it. Lauren's recorded voice filled the room. Mrs. Hale made it clear. As long as she had seat 1A, I would get paid extra outside of my salary. We have been doing this for years. The room froze. All eyes turned to Victoria, her face drained of color, her lips trembling. "This is fabricated. He made it all up to smear me." Marcus stepped forward, his voice short and powerful. "This data was taken directly from Orion's servers. It carries digital signatures and legal verification. If you wish, I am ready to involve the FBI immediately." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Harold Jenkins frowned. glancing from Victoria's folder to the evidence on the screen. For the first time, his hesitation vanished. "Mrs. Hale," Harold said coldly, "you exploited our employees for your personal gain and turned them into scapegoats. You are the one who destroyed their careers, not Marcus Reed." Applause broke out from one corner. It spread, growing louder. Echoing across the hall like war drums, Victoria tried to shout over it. "You do not understand. Without clients like me, Orion would not exist. We are the reason you even have jobs." But the applause drowned her out. A young flight attendant rose to her feet, eyes glistening with tears. "No, you are wrong. We exist because passengers trust us. If everyone were like you, we would have nothing left to be proud of." Marcus turned toward the union. His voice now carried not warning, but promise. "I cannot promise there will be no hardship. But I can promise this. From now on, no employee will ever have to choose between keeping a job and losing their conscience. We will build an Orion where everyone respected, from passenger to crew." Cheers exploded through the hall. Within minutes, New Orion was trending worldwide as journalists in the room posted the story live. Victoria, pale as paper, was escorted out by 2 security officers. The sharp echo of her heels no longer carried pride, only humiliation. Harold turned to Marcus, his eyes burning with conviction. "Mr. Reed, our union will support the reform plan. But remember, this trust is not because of your shares. It is because you stood with us, even when they called you an outsider." Marcus nodded, his heart pounding, a faint smile breaking through. In that moment, he knew the battle was not won with power or publicity. It was won with truth, and the truth had finally been set free. That day in the sky, Marcus Reed lost a first-class seat, but he reclaimed an entire system of trust. This story is not only about a man who held on to his dignity. It is proof that justice can begin from a seat that seemed insignificant. If you believe that no one deserves to be told you do not belong here, then hit like to help this story reach farther. Subscribe to continue with the journeys ahead. And leave a comment with just 2 words, dignity, to affirm that you too stand in the ranks of change.